Fantasy VII Remake. Anybody who is a fan of Final Fantasy, VII, is talking about the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Whether or not you support the notion of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, or whether or not you want to see it happen, people are talking about it and people are excited about it. Final Fantasy VII was one of, perhaps, is considered to be the best game ever made. I mean, Fan Magazine, greatest hits version here, says quite possibly the greatest game ever made. And people wouldn't argue. Final Fantasy VII introduced a lot of people into Final Fantasy, into Japanese RPGs. It's kind of what made Final Fantasy a household name. Had it not been for this game, we would not have seen the influx of RPGs that would continue for many years and still continue to this day. So there's definitely a lot of hype, a lot riding on this remake, and a lot of people are excited for it for various different reasons. So that being said, today we are going to explore things to keep, things to add, and things to get rid of in the Final Fantasy VII Remake. So let's go ahead and hop into it and talk about, first of all, things that I want to see them leave intact, because I feel like this is the most important. When it comes to Final Fantasy VII, there are certain things that absolutely have to remain in there. The first one I want to talk about is its original composition. Now, I am completely okay with them going in and taking out, taking it and reorchestrating it, rearranging it, and making an improved soundtrack. This is something that I would definitely support, but I feel like there needs to be an option to have the original as well, because it's what I grew up on, it's what I enjoyed. It's what I heard when I first experienced Final Fantasy VII. And Final Fantasy VII's music is as much ingrained in Final Fantasy as any other themes, elements, or anything else inside Final Fantasy VII. This is something that I want to see them continue to do. Give us that rearrangement, but give people who want to listen to the original the option to do so. Another few things that do need to remain intact is the story element. Final Fantasy VII has an incredible story. Despite its plot holes, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit, Final Fantasy VII has a flat-out amazing story that needs to be followed. It's full of heartache, full of death, full of sacrifice, full of love, full of friendship. These are all elements that push through in Final Fantasy VII's narrative that absolutely leave it just an amazing story and setup in a lot of different ways. Cloud's cross-dressing scene, Cloud talking about what was going on in Nibelheim, Cloud's time in Nidel, the unfortunate demise of Aerith, just so many other elements in there. I can make a list and go on forever talking about each scene they need to pay specific detail to in Final Fantasy VII to keep the game in check and what it was. But we're not going to go into that in this video. Another thing that they need to do is keep the combat relatively the same. Change it up a little bit if they need to, kind of make it more modern, revitalize it. I'm completely okay with that. But I think they need to kind of keep the original, keep the whole kind of the setup and everything remaining the same. Materia still needs to play a huge role in Final Fantasy VII. This was something in Final Fantasy VII that was very unique to Final Fantasy VII's world, was the Materia. That's something that needs to go full on as well and remain relatively the same. What else? What are the things that they need to add? This is huge because there are so many things I feel like that there are fine details that they could put in. Like I was saying, Final Fantasy VII is guilty of it. It does have plot holes, and this is kind of Square Enix's way to kind of go in and fill in some of these plot holes, explain certain events, explain certain things. And if you've played the Final Fantasy VII compilation, you kind of know that this has already gone in and filled some of those different plot holes in there. But there are so many different potential ways that they could potentially do this. And one of the major things that I do want to bring up is Vincent Valentine. Vincent Valentine is an optional character in Final Fantasy VII, and unfortunately for Vincent, he can be completely missed. He is one of the most interesting characters in Final Fantasy VII. Not only does he have his own fully developed backstory into kind of what happened to him, his own hardships and horrible things he went through, it also plays a lot of relevancy to the plot. This was something that, an optional side quest in Final Fantasy VII, that many people probably just glanced over and missed, and they didn't realize it was in there. But it does. It plays a huge role into the plot, giving you almost a much-needed backstory of 3 characters. And I'm not going to spoil who those characters are, but one of them I will say is Vincent. And that's something very interesting. I feel like Vincent and Yuffie need to be put into the story this time and not used as optional characters. One thing I think they need to add a little bit more in detail to is some of the events from Crisis Core and Dirge of Cerberus. It would be nice to see them kind of give Vincent his more Dirge of Cerberus look to Chaos. I'm sorry to say that Chaos was just bad looking as hell. And Dirge of Cerberus, while not the greatest game, it definitely had its fun and definitely had its enjoyable elements. I feel like that game could have had a lot more potential. They could have done more with it, but overall, for what Dirge of Cerberus was, I really feel like it kind of got left unappreciated. That also being on a note in itself as well. One thing I do want to see them do is focus a little bit more on the Turks as well. I mean, Final Fantasy VII's project is already going to be big enough, but why not take it further? Why not give us DLC about what the Turks were up to? You know how much I would love to play as Rude and Reno? That would be awesome too. There's so much they could do, so much that they could put in there, and as long as the game felt complete and nothing had been chopped out, I would be completely fine with that as well. You know, episodic, if they cut it off at certain points and make it feel like it's worth my time and money, I'm okay with it being episodic as well. That doesn't really bug me. And I don't know. There's so many different things that I feel that they could do. So many different elements that they could take and just run with and not necessarily change, but add to. That's a lot of what Final Fantasy VII Remake can potentially do, is add to. Another thing I want to see them do is change a lot when it comes to the motorcycle scene when escaping Midgard. Now, I know what you're saying. Come on, you can't change that. Au contraire, you can. And this is what I want to see. I want to see them not really change it, but revamp it. They've got better technology than what they have. They have a way to make this one of the most memorable scenes from the remake. And that's something I'm definitely looking forward to, is making it more immersive, more expansive, making it feel more, just actionized more than what it was. And Final Fantasy VII's, in the original Final Fantasy VII, there's so much more that they could do with it. And I think that would be badass as hell. I mean, one of the things that always irritated me is friggin' Barrett, man. He's got a friggin' gun strapped to his arm, and he's not doing any firing out the frickin' window trying to take down the Shinra soldiers. I mean, just putting that out there, but hey, stick his gun arm out the window. We could get a lot, mow down a lot of frickin' enemies that way. But that being said, I feel like that motorcycle scene, pay enough attention to it, would just be a magnificent masterpiece to behold. There are also some other things in there I feel like that they could leave out. Chocobo racing. Let's talk about Chocobo racing. Chocobo breeding, better yet. For the love of all that's good for the world, please, please Just do something different for the Knights of the Round Table. I don't want to go through the bullshit of collecting these different chocobos, ranking them up in Gold Saucer, taking them back to the farm, breeding these sons of bitches to pop out a gold chocobo just so I can fly over to where the Knights of the Round Table are and pick that shit up. Hell no. And I know there's people out there who are going to be like, you can't change that. That's ingrained in Final Fantasy VII. I don't care. I did it once. I don't want to do it again. Well, I probably will, because I will get the platinum for the Final Fantasy VII they put on the PlayStation 4 one of these days. But just please do not make chocobo breeding a thing in the Final Fantasy VII Remake. And if you do, please make that shit easier than what it was. It was too damn difficult. So, anywho, another thing I feel like that they absolutely need to pay attention to is the materia system. The materia system is also one of those things that they could potentially do so much more with. There is room to do something expansive, something amazing with the materia system. This is something that they need to focus upon. They need to fix and revitalize it and make it so much more immersive than what it was, I guess you could say. There's a lot that they could potentially do with it, but the materia system is something that is crucial to the Final Fantasy VII world, and it needs to have that attention and that detail, and that very much needs to remain intact. There's a lot of different ways that they could incorporate materia and make use of materia in the battle system, even more than what they had originally done in Final Fantasy VII. Now, something else interesting to mention about Final Fantasy VII as well is that Final Fantasy VII was the last Final Fantasy VII to use Ice, Ice 2, and Ice 3. Fire, Fire 2, and Fire 3. Because when Final Fantasy Tactics came out, and when Final Fantasy VIII came out, that is when they switched to Blizzard, Blizzara, and Blizzaga, changing those names, ingraining that into what we now just make nods to for Final Fantasy. You know, this is something that even Kingdom Hearts has adapted. So, you know, it'd be cool to, you know, Square, I'm sure they are going to stick with those names. Those have become staples in the series now, so why go in and change that? Well, I guess Final Fantasy Tactics didn't really change it. That was more of the War of the Lions, because they did still have the Ice 2. It was Final Fantasy VIII that they started renaming the magical spells, such as Fire, and Firaga. So, well, that's something that's probably going to pop up in the Final Fantasy VII Remake as well. And I'm completely cool with that. You know, I mean, it's something that's just kind of become a staple in the franchise as well. But the Final Fantasy VII Remake, I cannot tell you how stoked I am for this. I'm just hoping Square Enix has not bit off more than they can chew. I mean, that was kind of the issue with Versus 13 and why that game never really came out in the state that it was. I mean, it was a miracle and a half that Hajime Tabata was able to come around and do what he did and release the game Final Fantasy XV the way that it was. Final Fantasy XV is an amazing game, but it does have its issues. And I feel like given a little bit more development time to work with it, 15 could have been something amazing. But the fact that they were able to pump out the title that they had was absolutely amazing. So, what do you guys want to see in the Final Fantasy VII Remake? Leave those all down below in the comment box. Let me know what you guys think. I personally am looking forward to playing this. I want to see them incorporate so many different things, and I would like to see them kind of tie the other compilations more into the plot of Final Fantasy VII. This is something that I want. You know, and if it does good, we could even get more Final Fantasy VII games, and that would not be a bad thing. Square Enix needs to needs to be smart how they play that word out. And that's all I'm going to say. But thoughts, opinions, leave those down below in the comments. Be sure to hit subscribe there for me to keep up to date with all of my content. You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter, links down below in that description box. You guys have been watching the Spoony Bard, and most importantly, stay happy, be happy, game happy. The Spoony Bard is checking out.